Today we're going to go through the process of adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So the denominators are going to be different, and we're going to have to go through a series of steps to get them to the final reduced fraction when we're either adding or subtracting. Now the skills that we are incorporating in this that we've already learned. We've learned the parts of a fraction, numerator and denominator. We've learned about how to make an equivalent fraction. We've learned about how to reduce a fraction or simplify using a greatest common factor, GCF. And then most recently we've learned how to find the lowest common multiple or lowest common denominator, which is going to play a huge part in one of our steps today. So as we look up here at our chart, the first thing I like to tell students to do is take the problem if it's written horizontally and write it vertically. Step 2 is very important because if the denominators are different, if they're unlike, we have to find the lowest common multiple that they have in common, or the lowest common denominator. Step 3 is we have to make them equivalent. We have to make sure that both of the fractions that we are adding or subtracting have the same denominator. In step 4, we're just going to add and subtract the fractions, make sure that we're only adding or subtracting the numerators and the denominator stays the same. And then last but not least, a very important step, we're going to reduce if that fraction can be brought lower, or we're going to simplify if our answer turns out to be a improper fraction. We will convert it back to a mixed number. So I've got 4 examples we're going to go through. Our first example here is 2/5 plus 2/3. So first thing I'm going to do is write them vertically. And now I'm going to ask myself, where's the first time that 3 and 5 are going to meet? If I'm skip counting, if I make a list, or if I use prime factorization, either of those methods will work. My lowest common multiple of these two is going to be 15. So I come out to the side and I write a denominator of 15 for both. And now I have to move on to step 3 and make them equivalent. I'm asking myself, how do I get from 3 to 15? 3 times what equals 15? 3 times 5 is 15. So to make them equivalent, I have to do the same thing with the numerator. So 2 times 5 would be 10. On top, 5 times 3 equals 15. So I'm going to multiply the 2 times 3 to give me 6. I'm going to go ahead and bring down my denominator because it will not change. 15 stays 15. It does not get added to make 30. And then now I'm going to add my numerators and get 16. As I look at this fraction, this is now an improper fraction. I have to use division to convert it back into a mixed number. I like to use the term write it as I read it, so I know that the proper number is going into the cage as the dividend, and the other number is going to be my divisor. So I write it as I read it. 16 divided by 15. 15 cannot go into 1, but 15 goes into 16 once. That equals 15. I have 1 left over. Now, to write it properly, I want to really make sure, I like to use the analogy of reading a clock. We read a clock from the 12 hand at the top, as we move around to the 6 hand, and we finish up at the 9 hand. So I know that my answer is 1 and 1/15. Okay, moving on to step 2, I've got, example 2, I've got a fraction that involves subtraction with unlike denominators. So I'm going to rewrite them vertically. 7/8 minus 1/4. Now I want to ask myself, where's the first time that 4 are going to meet? It just so happens that one of our denominators we have here is the lowest common multiple. If I skip count, 4, 8, 12, 4 meets at 8 first. So I'm going to bring over my 7/8. I don't need to rename it or change it. And now I'm looking for an equivalent fraction of 1/4 over blank 8. So 4 times what gives me 8? 4 times 2. I'm going to do the same thing to the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. And now I go to subtract. Bring down my denominator, and 7 minus 2 is 5. I ask myself, can I reduce this fraction? Can I make it smaller? I cannot, because 5 is a prime number and it does not go into 8, so I'm finished. My next example is another addition problem. I have 6 over 7 plus 1 over 2. Now I'm going to find the lowest common multiple. 2 and 7 are both prime numbers. A trick that I like to tell students is anytime both of your numbers are prime, you can multiply them together to get the lowest common multiple or lowest common denominator. In this case, 7 and 2 make up 14. 14 is the first time that these two are going to meet, that they have something in common. Step 3, now I'm making them equivalent. 2 times what gives me 14? 2 times 7. So I have to do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 7 is 7. I come up to the top. 7 times what is 14? 7 times 2 is 14. I multiply 6 times 2 and get 12. Bring down my 14. 12 plus 7 is 19. Now I'm on to the final step. I see that this is an improper fraction, so I have to convert it back into a mixed number using division. Write it as I read it. 19 divided by 14. 14 cannot go into 1, but it goes into 19 one time. 14 times 1 is 14. When I subtract, I have 5 left over. If I read this like a clock, going around, 1 and 5 fourteenths. 1 and 5 fourteenths is the simplified answer for 6 sevenths plus a half. Last example here is 5/8 minus 3/12. Now I'm asking myself, where's the first time that 8 and 12 are going to meet? If I'm skip counting, if I make a list, if I do prime factorization. My math facts tell me that 8 times 3 is 24 and 12 times 2 is 24, so the first place they're going to meet is at 24. Now when I make them equivalent, 12 goes into 24 twice, so 3 times 2 is 6. 8 goes into 24 3 times, and 3 times 5 is 15. Now I'm subtracting here. I bring down my denominator because it does not change. 15 minus 6 is 9. And now I'm going to ask myself, is this fraction in lowest terms? Is it simplified? Is it reduced? The answer is no, it's not. So I'm asking myself, what is the greatest common factor that 9 and 24 have in common? I know that factors of 9 are 1 and 3 and 9. I know that factors of 24, there's much more factors, but 3 is the biggest common factor of both. So I'm going to use division to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same amount. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So I get a final answer of 3/8 when I subtract those and then reduce. To wrap up, I think that using good organization when copying the problem down, making sure that you line everything up vertically, that you find a common multiple or common denominator that is the lowest, and then make sure that we always reduce or simplify our fractions into lowest terms at the end.